Hello and welcome to the third and final part of my journey to France on a press trip arranged by Le Boat. I and two friends were travelling along the Canal du Midi, and as you join us on this Wednesday morning, we were having breakfast. That done, Lorna untied the bow line, while Sally sorted the rear. I was at the helm on the flybridge. We'd moored the previous night on the outskirts of Rubia, so we got to see the village as we departed. The next substantial town would be Ompes, where Le Boat have one of their bases. The clouds and overcast skies of the prior day had vanished, but the winds had not subsided much, with the waves on the canal an indication of the gusts. Seafarers will laugh at those waves, but to have that level of movement on the small surface area of a canal means it is quite breezy. Almost immediately we came to Argent Lock, a single chamber we passed through without incident. We'd shared the lock with another boat, which meant it was now on our tail, prompting us to keep the throttle forward. The excellent canal map provided by Le Boat was once again our guide. Having only joined us the previous day, Lorna was keen to do some boating, and I was happy to have a break from the helm. That's the Château d'Argent-Minervois, a 900-year-old castle. I don't know why we'd suddenly found a glut of traditional English narrowboats in the last 24 hours, but it was a pleasure to spot them. The countryside and the view was lovely. A double lock awaited at Pêche-Laurier, and a treat for Lorna and Sally, who both squealed like teenagers about how hot Stefan the lockkeeper was and all the things they'd like to do with him. I felt somewhat disparaged. But I had a more prosaic concern.
Well, that last lock was complicated for a couple of reasons. Firstly, just before we went in, the bow thruster packed up, which is unfortunate. Must have just got a bit of muck in it from the canal, which is not uncommon, and that made manoeuvring a bit difficult. And then in the lock, we were a gigantic boat next to a very small one, and the force of the water coming in against the bow pushed it up, and we gently nudged, let's say, the other. It was a gentle nudge, but it was embarrassing because they glared at us, and I was the one standing there holding the rope, and all a bit awkward. So we've let them go ahead, and we're now going at a snail's pace so that they can get well out of our way, and we need never see them again. Meanwhile, we've phoned Le Boat and said the bow thruster's no longer working, and they've said, don't worry, call into the next base, which is only a couple of kilometres away, and they will have a look at it. So that's all okay. Meanwhile, it's a beautiful day.
With another double lock before we got to Ompes, and knowing the Lockie's preference for boats to share, it was no surprise when we encountered 3 hire boats coming the other way in quick succession. Ahead of that upcoming lock flight was a flood barrier, gates that can be closed in case of high water levels. Lorna steered us through, helped certainly by my pointed reminder that it was my name on the insurance and my credit card that would get charged if she scraped the boat. I like to be helpful, or maybe I was just still grumpy about hunky Stefan. With at least 2 boats coming down the flight, it unfortunately meant we'd be going up with the boat we'd bumped against in the earlier lock. Oh dear. The map showed us we were almost at Ompes, where Le Boat could sort our bow thruster. There was just Ompes Lock itself to pass through, which was ready for us as soon as this other boat cleared the entryway. We crept up towards Le Boat's marina and turned in, mooring on their services point. Less from choice and more because the wind blew me against it as I was backing in. This did not help my mood.
Well, I didn't film much over the last few locks because frankly we've had a nightmare, mostly I think of my own making, partly misunderstandings between lockkeeper and me, and partly my own ignorance. We went into the first lock with another boat, and it's very hard getting into these locks because they have curved sides, so you need to be able to steer into them, and given that our bow thruster packed up just before we went into the first lock, that just made things a bit awkward because you're trying to steer with the tiller at the back and fishtail the boat in all the time, not thumping the boat that's already in the lock with you. And they glared at us, and then when the lock was going up, the water just pushed the bow of the boat sideways, and we gently bumped them, and they didn't look happy with that. And then there was a series of further locks where we just had a bit of a nightmare, culminating in the very last one, which was behind a bridge. And there was a rickety old bit of plank of wood sticking out the side of the canal bank, which I thought, is that really a lock landing? I don't know. There might be some concrete steps up the side of the lock like there have been previously. So we just went merrily into the lock because the gates was open. No, there were no concrete steps. The rickety old planks were the lock landing, and we were supposed to have dropped someone off. So we then got shouted at by the irate French lockkeeper who said, come up the steps, which they don't like you doing. Only I couldn't get to the steps because the bow thruster wasn't working. Here's the bow thruster, he said. I said, we don't have a bow thruster, we shouted back to him. And eventually the wind blew us over, not to the left-hand steps I was trying to aim for, but the right-hand steps. And Lorna managed to jump off, take a rope. Meanwhile, the French lockkeeper muttering frustratedly and exasperatedly, and frankly quite rightly so, because I should simply have let someone off at the lock landing, which with hindsight was quite clearly a lock landing. And then we came up that lock, and now we're hiding at the Le Boat base so that hopefully they can fix the bow thruster. Either way, I'm not pleased with my standard of boating there. I'm very strict with myself at knowing what I'm doing, and I don't like being incompetent, and that was largely me being incompetent.
I set off to find the maintenance team, having a look at the Le Boat fleet as I went. While they came aboard, we went for a wander around the canal side area. But when we returned, well, wouldn't you know it?
Somewhat inevitably, having stopped here to tell them that the bow thruster doesn't work, when the team came aboard, which they did very rapidly, they pressed the button and the bow thruster worked immediately, no question. So don't we look foolish? The day just gets better. Anyway, we've had a spot of lunch, which was delicious at a local restaurant, and now we're about to head off again. And it's got very, very windy, but the sun is out.
We nosed the cruiser out from the basin. Thankfully, no traffic coming along as we did. Yes, it's a narrowboat. Seems odd spotting them in the south of France.
All good things must come to an end, they say, and even though there's a couple of days of this trip still left, I have already started getting the phone out and looking at the logistics of getting back, because this is a one-way trip. We're taking the boat from point A to point B, then we've got to go back to point A to get our flight home. So I've been looking up taxis and trains and buses and all the different things. Taxis here, by the way, ferociously expensive, so I've been looking at train and bus options, and I'm able to do that because I've got roaming data on my phone courtesy of the Saily.com eSIM, which I downloaded and installed before I came here. Now, Saily's eSIMs essentially give you roaming data in something like 190 countries or 8 regions of the world. You download the app from Saily.com, the Google Play Store or the App Store onto your phone. You create an account, log in, and you say, I'm going to this place for this long and I need this much data. And you say go, and then when you arrive, the SIM activates itself electronically on your phone. There's no mucking about with actually taking this old SIM out. It's all done electronically, and then you just have mobile data in the country you've travelled to at very affordable rates. So it has proved to be very useful already, giving me super fast internet as I've been looking things up. Saily, backed by NordVPN, of course, very technical folk, and not only do you get your data, they've also got some kind of web protection and virtual location features built into the eSIM as well. Do have a look at their website. But remember, when you get to checkout, enter the code CruisingTheCut for 15% discount off their data rates. That is code CruisingTheCut. And as I say, once you get there, it activates itself and you have roaming data at very affordable rates. So wherever you're going, whenever you're going, once you've got the app installed, of course, it's then there ready for the next time you go abroad, business, pleasure, whatever you're going for. Saily.com, and remember, use code CruisingTheCut at checkout.
Before we reached Trebs, where we'd returned the boat, there were a smattering of locks to ascend. With little sign of activity here, we secured the boat to the bollards and waited. And waited. Until all became clear. A passenger boat joined us, and they have automatic priority at locks, hence the delay until they arrived. Fortunately, there was still space for us to join them and another hire boat, and thanks to the bow thruster now working again, getting in was much easier than the morning's encounters. The passengers were enjoying the experience, and on the lock side was a lovely little stall selling produce like oeufs and confiture. The trip boat assumed we'd be going along at speed, so they insisted we go first. This put the pressure on not to dilly-dally, so we pushed the throttle again to maximum. We didn't even dare slow for bridges.
Duck, mind the sticky out bit.
Yes, be warned of little metal protrusions on some of the bridge brickwork. You could do yourself a nasty injury.
They don't come out. It's concrete.
Another aqueduct came up. Being a short one, I only had time to film one side, and Murphy's Law meant the other side was far more picturesque. Immediately following was another spillway, the Éperchoir de l'Argent Double. This boat hails from Liverpool. It's a long way from home. Sit back and relax as we cruise through the countryside. At the next écluse, there was a cafe and shop. But even better, there was a dog who wanted its ball thrown. Sally duly obliged. And another lock, which we thought would be much of a muchness, but in fact features an unusual art installation of sculptures, some of which move as the wind blows them. At this point we were here, and as soon as we flipped over the page, we'd be on the final stretch to Trebs.
All in 100ml bottles were left. Yeah.
Look, an otter! It was now 5 p.m, and we were on a bit of a rush to get through some more locks before they closed at 7 in order to reach our hoped-for mooring. The other hire boat we'd shared locks with was on the same mission, so we hared along at speed together. We made it to the Écluse de Fonfil, but time was against us.
It's 20 to 7 in the evening and we're still in the top chamber of the 3-lock flight before the one we wanted to get through. They shut at 7, we've still got to get there. It's not going to happen. So that means we've now got to try to find somewhere to moor up along the next stretch of canal before the next lock, because it just shuts at 7. We can't go any further at that point. We just need to find somewhere for the night. There are very few places marked on the map, so fingers crossed for us.
All eyes were to the sides to see if there was anywhere wild we could tie up. Ultimately, if we didn't find somewhere, we'd moor on the lock landing, knowing it was closed until 9 AM, so no one would need to use it. And that's what came to pass, and we weren't the only ones in the same boat, so to speak, with 2 others also tying up here for the night. It was a very nice spot, and after a walk to stretch our legs, we retired for the night. As predicted, Thursday was very windy, with gusts of 40 to 50 miles an hour forecast. This was why we'd pressed on so keenly on the prior days. While Lorna still considered it summer, Sally was of differing opinion. We made sure we entered the lock as soon as it opened, so as not to block the landing stage. But with rain starting to come down, the inside steering position was suddenly looking attractive, so we all decamped into the living area and had our first go at driving from the lower helm.
It is different steering from down here. Being at the side instead of in the middle, and just with the restricted vision.
That didn't do a lot. Lorna had a go. The rain stopped, but we stayed down as conditions looked variable, to say the least. You do notice it's trickier to line the boat up for tight spaces when you're steering inside, rather than having the top-down view from above. We were aiming for Trèbes, where we'd leave the boat. Having no slippers, Sally used gloves to fend off the chill and fortified herself with snacks. It was reassuring to see we weren't the only hardcore boaters battling through the gloom, rain and wind. There was a swell worthy of the North Sea. Incredibly, these were the first ducks we'd seen on the canal. It was all a bit jungle-like here.
We've arrived at the final lock flight of the journey. 3 locks in a staircase, and then we come into Trèbes, however you pronounce it, and that is our end destination. And we're actually here a day early, so we have a plan to moor in the Le Boat facility, the marina there, and then just go exploring on foot, both around Trèbes itself and also do a day trip to Carcassonne before we finally officially hand the boat back.
So this was it, our final lock.
Who's going skiing too?
Oh look, it's a jam shop. How marvellous. And it looked like quite the jam at the Le Boat Marina, but I managed to squeeze the boat onto the end of a little island in the middle, this time using the wind to my advantage. It was lunchtime, so we went for a walk into town. And, as you do when in France, we went to an Italian restaurant to eat. I had an excellent pizza. A lazy afternoon and evening followed. The next day we took the bus to Carcassonne. It would have been too long by boat. Carcassonne is home to the largest and best preserved fortified medieval city in Europe. In 1997 it was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The city boasts 52 towers, 2 concentric walls totalling almost 2 miles of ramparts, and there's a castle in the middle built in the 12th century. The area has been occupied since around 600 BC, as well as by the Romans, the Visigoths, the Saracens and the Franks. I know it looks like something from Disney, but this is genuine, actual stonework, not plastic, and hundreds of years old. Entrance, remarkably, is free, and you walk across a drawbridge over a dry moat to get in. At this point, it does become a bit Disney, because every square metre of the streets is packed with shops selling tourist souvenirs, all much of a muchness to my eye. You can buy a suit of armour if you'd like, though luggage restrictions on the return flight prevented me from doing so. It was all carefully colourful, designed to entice. The bus journey had been exhausting, so we found the cafe area for the worst waffle I've ever had the displeasure of eating, though this was partly down to errors in translation when ordering. This basilica used to be Carcassonne Cathedral, but there's now another one. There's also a hotel here. The double walls really are very impressive, and you get a superb view. We were very pleased to make the acquaintance of Monsieur Le Puscat. Eventually we'd had enough and left, looking back over the city one final time before seeking where the canal comes into Carcassonne. If we'd had more days and less wind, this is where we would have boated. As it was, we had to satisfy ourselves with gongoozling.
That we were following.
And that was that, the end of our trip, with many thanks to Le Boat. Thanks for watching, cheerio.